North Korea just launched 74 rockets from Russian-controlled bases on Ukraine. At first, it looked like Ukraine had no way to stop the massive strike. But what happened in the next 20 minutes shocked everyone watching and changed the way the world saw Russia and Pyongyang's gamble in this war. At 4:15 p.m., under the quiet skies over eastern Ukraine, silence broke as dozens of trails of fire suddenly ripped upward. From Russian-occupied bases near Belgorod and Rostov, 74 rockets were launched in a coordinated wave. Among them were North Korea's KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles and heavy multiple-launch rockets, fired together in one of the largest combined salvos of the war. Dozens of launchers had been hidden for weeks under camouflage nets, moved at night, and staged in open fields disguised as transport convoys. Satellite imagery later confirmed that both Russian and North Korean crews had prepared this strike long in advance, aiming to overwhelm Ukraine's defenses in a single decisive blow. For the first moments, the skies looked almost unreal. Contrails twisted upward in every direction, splitting apart like branches before arching down toward Ukrainian territory. Radar operators inside Ukraine's command bunkers saw their screens light up with dozens of fast-moving tracks at once. Multiple launches, multiple vectors, one officer reported as the system calculated trajectories. Within seconds, alarms across Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Zaporizhzhia began to scream. Sirens echoed through crowded neighborhoods as families ran from apartments into shelters. Cars swerved off roads, people abandoned buses, and entire train stations emptied as civilians rushed underground. Everyone had heard sirens before, but this time felt different. 74 rockets in a single wave meant that no city was safe. The attack wasn't random. Intelligence later showed that Russia and North Korea had been coordinating for weeks. Convoys carrying rocket systems had crossed into Russian territory under heavy guard. Communications between Pyongyang and Moscow increased sharply, using encrypted channels rarely seen before. By positioning the rockets close to Ukraine's borders, Russia hoped to create a saturation strike, one so massive that Ukraine's Patriots, NASAMS, and S-300 systems would be forced to fire everything they had, leaving gaps wide enough for some rockets to break through. For Russian planners, this was the moment to show that Western air defenses could be beaten by sheer volume. Inside Ukrainian bunkers, the first estimates were grim. At least 24 rockets were targeting Kharkiv's industrial zones, another wave aimed at Dnipro's fuel storage sites, and the rest appeared directed at frontline depots near Zaporizhzhia. Operators had less than 3 minutes to decide which targets to prioritize. Every choice mattered. Shoot at the wrong cluster, and a rocket could tear into a residential block. Hold fire too long, and multiple warheads could slam into fuel tanks, igniting infernos that would burn for days. The room was filled with the sound of alarms and the urgent voices of officers calculating interception paths. Above ground, the first explosions shook fields outside Kharkiv. Farmers reported seeing flashes of fire in the distance as incoming warheads slammed into empty ground short of their targets. Windows shattered across small villages. Social media filled with shaky videos of streaking trails in the sky, followed by fireballs in the horizon. For a moment, it looked like the defenses might be too slow, but then the first Ukrainian interceptors roared upward. Patriot batteries locked onto incoming KN-23s, their missiles twisting into the sky in arcs of fire. The battle for control of the skies had begun. At 4:18 p.m., as the first Ukrainian interceptors rose into the sky, the scale of the attack became clearer. Russia hadn't just fired ordinary artillery. This was a deliberate attempt to push Ukraine's defenses to the breaking point. The rockets came from multiple bases across Belgorod and Rostov, launched in carefully timed salvos. By staggering the trajectories, Russian planners hoped to confuse radar operators and force interceptors to engage from several angles at once. It was the kind of strike designed not just to cause destruction, but to break confidence in Ukraine's shield. Inside Ukrainian air defense bunkers, commanders studied screens filled with red arcs. KN-23 ballistic missiles screamed in at hypersonic speeds, their unpredictable flight paths making them harder to intercept. Alongside them, heavy multiple-launch rockets filled the radar with smaller signatures, meant to flood the system with so many tracks that some would inevitably slip through. Civilian sirens blared non-stop as city loudspeakers urged people into shelters. For Ukraine's crews, there was no pause. The decision-making process had to be immediate. Which target was real, which was a decoy, and which could cause the most damage if it struck? Kharkiv felt the first wave. At 4:20 p.m., air raid sirens gave way to the sound of explosions on the city's northern edge. The initial rockets slammed into open ground near a logistics hub, shaking buildings for miles. Windows blew out, car alarms wailed, and the night sky turned orange with flames. Drone footage later showed fuel tanks igniting in the distance, sending black smoke climbing high above the city. Emergency crews scrambled even as more incoming tracks lit up the radar. Dnipro was next. Dozens of residents filmed the night sky as glowing trails cut through the clouds. Some rockets appeared to break apart mid-flight as interceptors smashed into them, detonating harmlessly above fields and rivers. Others continued downward, forcing civilians to huddle inside stairwells and basements as the blasts grew closer. Social media spread footage of bright flashes followed by thunderous booms, shaking entire apartment blocks. For those who lived through months of bombardment, this strike still felt different, bigger, louder, and more coordinated. But here's where it got even more dangerous. The attack was not just from the air. Russian artillery crews began firing Smerch multiple launch rockets from the border at the same time, masking the North Korean strike with their own barrage. At the same moment, dozens of drones were launched in an effort to distract Ukrainian radars and interceptors. For a few minutes, it looked like chaos had taken hold. So many threats filled the sky that even advanced systems struggled to keep track. Yet Ukraine's air defense network had been preparing. Patriot PAC-3 crews locked onto the fastest targets, prioritizing the KN-23s that could devastate urban centers. NASAMS and IRIS-T batteries layered the defense around population hubs. Within moments, dozens of Ukrainian interceptors streaked upward, turning the night sky into a battlefield of fire. Explosions erupted in the air as interceptors struck warheads, sending fragments scattering across fields. One by one, the incoming rockets began to disappear from radar. The first contact had begun, and Ukraine's survival depended on whether its layered defense could hold. At 4:22 p.m. by now, more than half of the 74 rockets were inside Ukrainian airspace. The plan had been to overwhelm, to saturate, to make the defenses break. But instead of collapsing, Ukraine's defenses began shaping the battlefield into a kill zone. Radar operators funneled incoming rockets into designated interception corridors. Every battery had its role. The Patriots took the high-arc trajectories, the NASAMS covered medium ranges, and Buck M1 and S-300 systems picked off anything slipping through at lower altitudes. Ukrainian gunners knew the geography, knew where the rockets would pass, and they turned those paths into walls of fire. Explosions lit up the sky above open fields. One after another, incoming warheads were destroyed hundreds of meters above the ground. Residents in Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia filmed the night skies glowing with dozens of flashes, the sound of interceptors roaring past like thunder. The saturation strike was beginning to lose its teeth. Where Russia and North Korea expected panic, Ukraine created order. In fact, the very density of the attack gave air defense crews clear vectors to lock onto. Each destroyed rocket cleared the way for the next interceptor to find its mark. But the enemy wasn't done. Russian artillery continued to pound frontline areas with Smerch MLRS fire, hoping to mask the larger assault. More drones buzzed low, trying to blind defenses or force them to waste ammunition. A few drones slipped through and detonated harmlessly against empty warehouses, but the majority fell victim to electronic warfare. Jamming units scrambled the GPS signals, sending drones spinning out of control before crashing into fields. Ukrainian soldiers later described watching the drones fall like broken birds as their operators lost control. Still, not everything could be stopped. A handful of rockets broke through the wall of defenses. One struck near a frontline town in Zaporizhzhia, blasting a Ukrainian infantry bunker. But the fortifications held. Concrete walls absorbed most of the shock, leaving only minor injuries. Another rocket hit near a civilian shelter outside Kharkiv. But because residents had moved underground minutes earlier, casualties were minimal. Windows shattered, cars caught fire, but lives were saved by the warning system and quick reaction. Here's where it got even more critical. Ukraine's defenses weren't just absorbing, they were preparing to strike back. ISR assets, including Bayraktar drones and MiG-29 fighters, were in the air tracking the precise launch locations across the border. Each coordinate was fed instantly into HIMARS systems on standby. At 4:22 p.m., counterfire began. HIMARS rockets streaked across the sky, targeting identified launch sites near Belgorod. Within minutes, explosions erupted on Russian soil. At least 6 launchers were struck in their firing positions. Satellite images later confirmed burning wreckage of trucks and command vehicles. The kill zone had done its job, but now the counterattack was underway. Russia and North Korea had fired their barrage. Ukraine had absorbed it, broken it, and was already striking back. At 4:40 p.m., by the end of the barrage, the battlefield told the story clearly. Out of 74 rockets launched from Russian-controlled bases with North Korean support, more than 50 had been intercepted mid-air. The sky itself had become a shield, layered with tracers, interceptors, and explosions. What was meant to cripple Ukraine instead showed the strength of its defenses. Burning fragments of destroyed rockets littered fields outside Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia, black smoke rising where warheads had been neutralized in the air. Emergency crews moved quickly, dousing fires and clearing debris, but the cities remained intact. The counterstrike was already taking its toll. HIMARS salvos had destroyed at least 6 of the rocket launchers in Belgorod. Satellite feeds confirmed charred wrecks of mobile systems, craters around storage depots, and secondary explosions that signaled ammunition stacks had gone up in flames. For Russia and North Korea, the cost of the assault grew heavier by the hour. The partnership had shown its hand, but the return fire showed it could not deliver decisive results. Russian artillery tried to maintain pressure on frontline positions, but without the coordinated rocket barrage, the fire lacked impact. On the ground, Ukrainian forces counted the outcome. Frontline infantry reported only light damage to bunkers. Civilian shelters held firm, and the early warning sirens had ensured people were underground before impacts. Casualties were far lower than Moscow and Pyongyang had hoped. Instead of fear, morale surged. Ukrainian officials released footage of intercepts lighting the skies, calling it proof that their country could withstand even the heaviest barrages. Social media across Ukraine carried the same message: "We are still standing." The failed strike also carried a global impact. Analysts noted that North Korea's much-advertised KN-23 rockets, when deployed in bulk, had failed to break a layered defense. Western partners described the event as a stress test for Ukraine's missile shield, one that had passed. The cost ratio was striking: millions of dollars in rockets fired, intercepted by weapons that proved faster, smarter, and better coordinated. The world saw that the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang could inflict damage, but not deliver victory. By evening, the message was clear. This wasn't just another exchange of fire. It was a warning written in smoke and shattered launchers. For Russia and North Korea, the attempt to overwhelm had failed. For Ukraine, the night proved that its skies could hold, even against combined barrages. And for the world, the attack underlined a simple truth: missiles alone will not break Ukraine. This was only the beginning. If it were you, what do you think pushed this strike to the edge of disaster? Was it North Korea's reckless firepower, or Russia's gamble that went too far? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every idea helps us understand how these scenarios could unfold in the real world. If you found this video valuable, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss our next Frontline Breakdown. This is Navy Point, where every battle tells a story. See you on the next mission.